On behalf of the Aga Khan Youth and Sports Board and the Aga Khan Economic Planning Board, we wanted to welcome you to our first event hosted by Perpetuity Podcasts. And today is going to be a live podcast event. So it's our first event, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. Perpetuity is a podcast run by two university students, Zakir and Khizr, studying economics, supported by AKEPB and AKYSB, aiming to bridge the gap between aspiring talent and industry experts. Perpetuity aims to bring in industry leaders from all sectors to speak on their journey, the state of their fields, and offer advice to aspiring talent. Founded in 2018 is our first guest for the podcast, Delhicious. Delhicious is an award-winning Ayurvedic-inspired plant-based skincare brand, which is strongly rooted in the founder's Indian heritage. With a combined audience of 4.5 million people on social media, Delhicious are taking over the organic skincare space by a storm. Without further ado, and without taking away their thunder, I'm going to pass it on to our wonderful guest for this evening. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here. I'm Zakir, and this is Khizr. And we just wanted to welcome you to Perpetuity Podcast's first episode with the lovely guests and founders of Delhicious, Zara and Zakir. Before we get started, we'd just like to thank you for your time today and being our first guest. It's incredible to start with such an incredible company, one with such a huge audience on social media, and with one with such an interesting story as well. Before we get started onto talking about all things Delhicious, I think it's great if you could tell us a little bit about yourselves and a bit of an overview of the milestones that Delhicious has had since its inception.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. Nice to be here. It's nice to see such a great turnout as well. It's probably not often you get two Zakirs on one stage. Thanks for coming. A bit about us and our backgrounds. I'm Zakir. I went through a stereotypical Asian kind of upbringing in that education was the forefront of everything. Went to university. Off the back of university, I went on to a graduate program, moved around with a few different companies, more recently in asset management. So I was in a corporate career for about 10 to 12 years, which I enjoyed, but I knew that I was always going to exit that. So I've been in various industries from banking, asset management, recruitment, etc. And Zara's background is very much different.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Zara, my background's very different. I graduated from uni and I ended up working for a small business, and I was pretty much doing everything in that small business. It was a accessories and gifting company. So I learned a lot about bringing a product to market. And then after that, I also went into a graduate program and ended up in teaching for a little while. So I was teaching for about 5 or 6 years before we ended up starting Delhicious.
And I guess a bit about Delhicious. So we started about 4 years ago, a real grassroots story. We were just at home making products. I guess both of us have always been into skincare, and equally we've been quite entrepreneurial in just kind of how we think and visions that we have. We just started making products, making formulations, trying it out on friends and family, seeing what works. We started with one product, which is the pink body scrub there. And it was within the first six to 8 months that we got an order for over 100,000 units. And bearing in mind, we're still at home. And we don't have a very big house either. So there's a story to that, which I guess we'll come to a little bit later down the line. But since then, we fulfilled that order from home. We've gained quite a few stockists. So we're with Debenhams. We're with them in stores when they had their stores. We're still with them online now. We're stocked with Beauty Base, and we've got a few other international retailers as well. But there's a lot of growth that we want to do in that space.
Thanks. So you guys have very interesting backgrounds, but I can't help but notice that you didn't have skincare experience before Delhicious. So I guess my question would be, how did the initial idea come about? And without any experience in the sector, how did you actually go about turning it into a commercial venture?
So it was actually a really organic story. When I was pregnant with my second daughter, I developed a dry skin condition. And usually whenever you have a dry skin problem, you go to the doctors and they straight away prescribe steroids. Of course, being pregnant, I didn't want to use anything that was chemical-based. So that was where the idea came about, where we started formulating with natural products, natural ingredients. And that's when we formulated the body scrub. So we launched it. I think I was still on maternity leave when we actually started the business. And then I think it was within 6 6 months, Harper's Bazaar, the beauty editor, reviewed it and she loved it. So it was featured in Harper's Bazaar. And then it was BBA's Asian Network called us on to the radio just to talk about it. And then we got the glossy box order. So we kind of almost fell into it in a very organic, natural way. It wasn't something that we thought about. We didn't think about entering the beauty industry. It's quite a saturated space. It's quite difficult to actually enter the market. But yeah, it was a really organic and natural way for us.
It's an incredible organic story, as you say, and the growth of the business. But at that stage, you're obviously a startup, right? It's really early doors, 6 months, 7 months in. And then you got this 10,000 order. Was it 10,000? 100,000. Oh, even better. 100,000 order from Glossybox. And how did you go about fulfilling that order? You mentioned it was in your home. What was the plan of action when you got that order? How did it go from, Glossybox wants these orders to let's send them off?
Do you know what? I still remember the day when we kind of got that deal, and it took some time to get that deal over, but it was only when we kind of signed the deal that we realized what we just got ourselves into. So from making 100 units at home at a time to then thinking about making 100,000 units within a 4-month timescale it was practically an impossible task. So what that involved was essentially us turning our home into a bit of a factory and a warehouse. So we had to get rid of our furniture downstairs. So our first floor had no furniture. We had essentially commercial industrial machines brought in. So like volumetric filling machines, mixing machines. So we had about 6 to 8 different machines in the house. So you can imagine what the electricity bill was like at that point. We probably wouldn't survive if it was kind of now, but and on top of that, we had friends and family to help us. So it was just a case of really detailed planning. I was still working full time, so I had a pretty kind of big corporate role, which I was doing this on the side of. So it was just a crazy experience. I mean, just imagine having 15 or 20 pallets on your driveway, and your neighbors just looking at you, thinking, "What are these guys doing?" And like having lorries turn up, and we had to put unit in front of our address to get lorries to come to it. So they think this is a unit, it's a business address.
It's actually just our house, literally.
Yeah.
You're making it sound way more professional than it was. It really wasn't. And bear in mind, we had 2 very, very small children at the time as well. And honestly, I think it was literally like 4 months of hell. It was quite literally the most back-breaking physical work, because we're literally getting like 25 kilo bags of Indian tea delivered to us and we're unloading it. Like, we literally did every single thing. Every single part of that order was fulfilled by us. But I think we just saw it as an opportunity of 100,000 people would get our product in their hands. I mean, Glossybox is the biggest subscription beauty box in the UK. So it was just an opportunity we couldn't pass up, because we knew it's a great PR opportunity. Even commercially, it didn't make sense. It's probably not something we take on now, but at the time when you're starting out, you just kind of want to grab anything you can. But yeah, it was crazy. It was a crazy summer. And
it's a good point, the commercial side of it, because when you hear 100,000 units, you think, wow, that's kind of a lot of money. But in reality, it wasn't a commercial opportunity for us. It was more an opportunity to get our product in 100,000 people's hands, and that really helped us, because people started trying the product, they liked it, and they came back. So it was a real journey. I'm sure we can share loads more details around how we done it. We've got crazy pictures of our kids on top of like 10 boxes, climbing boxes, pallets on the driveway. We actually had a marquee in the garden as well, to effectively store and make product as well. So it was a very crazy experience. I'm glad we done it. It was, I remember the day when the last lorry came to take kind of last 15 pallets away. And the feeling of just like, I can't explain it, but it just felt like relief over kind of 4 to 6 months of real graft. But that real graft kind of really put our business out there and really helped. So yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, and equally, the Glossybox, they're under the Hut Group, which are a massive beauty business. But they were really supportive, and they were very aware that we're a small business. It's literally like a husband and wife team making products in our kitchen. But they were so lovely, and they were really, really flexible with us, because usually they work with really big brands where sampling opportunities is nothing to them. I think we're in the same box as Colgate, or one of these other really big brands. But they were really supportive. They gave us loads of time, and just commercially they tried to make it work for us as well. So that was really, really helpful.
I guess it's worth noting as well that they last year asked us for 500,000 units, and we said no, because again, there's a time and place for everything. We've kind of grown from then. We still class ourselves as a startup slash scale up. We're in the process. The next couple of years for us is quite big as we kind of scale up and really kind of start achieving our targets, and we've got quite big, bold targets as well. But yeah, there's a time and place for everything, and there was a good time for that.
That's just amazing how you guys went through, like you're mentioning, taking up all of these pallets in your driveway. Your neighbor's probably thinking, who are these people that have come in? But there was something that you mentioned to me before we actually started the podcast, and it was some statistics on your website. And I'd just love for you to repeat them. It was how quickly some of your products were selling out and restocking. And I think you'd really appreciate listening to that.
Yeah, so I think it was after we launched the body scrubs, we formulated the moisturizers, which are the body balms. And it's kind of skipping forward a little bit, maybe like a year forward into the journey, but we joined TikTok. And I am not the TikTok generation. It's not a thing that I wanted to join. And we thought, there's a lot of brands that are doing it, and let's see how it goes. So we joined TikTok, and our videos started going viral. Within like a few minutes of us restocking the product, and bearing in mind we're still making them at home, we'd be making these moisturizers at home. We'd put maybe like 500 units, and within 2 minutes they would sell out. And it was because people were realizing how incredible they were for their skin, because they work incredible for conditions like eczema, dermatitis, and psoriasis. And people were sending us their before and after pictures, and we just kind of share them and say, oh, look, this is what our products can do. And then it just kind of blew up from there. And I think at one point we had a wait list of 50,000 people for the original balm. So it was just insane. It just kind of blew up pretty much overnight.
So it's incredibly interesting to hear how you fulfill that deal. But as you mentioned, you were a startup at the time, and obviously you still class yourself as one now, but at the time you were really small. So how do you actually go about getting a deal with the UK's largest sort of beauty box?
So I think we, quite early on, were featured in quite a bit of press. Zara mentioned Harper's Bazaar. We were featured on BBC Asian Radio as well, BuzzFeed. So we got press quite early on, which Zara secured herself. So we had no PR behind us, just our products to kind of back up what we're doing. And we got noticed by them. So they essentially reached out to us and said, what do you think? And we were actually in the process of repackaging and redesigning what the product looked like and what they actually received at the end. So they didn't even get a sample for us. They kind of believed in our vision and what we had. So typically you'd have a sample at the very least before someone gets 100,000 units of it. But in this case, they didn't. We had quite basic packaging, which is what we started with, because it was more the product that we were focusing on rather than the brand. But that period allowed us to really kind of focus and make the brand what it is today, which is something we've done ourselves.
Yeah, and I think PR is really important. We've not spent a penny on advertising. We've not spent money on PR. But I think if you're hungry for something and you hound journalists enough, they will turn around and respond. And a lot of the time, that's basically what I was doing. I was just hounding all these journalists and kind of asking them, oh, do you want to try my product? Do you want to try it? And I think the branding always stood out, and people would straight away go, oh, your brand looks nice. It sounds interesting. The name sounds interesting. Heritage sounds good. Okay, let's feature it. So the press definitely helped, and I think that's quite an important piece when you're starting a business, to have those kind of goals. In our first 6 to 8 months, we were like, we just want to be featured, to be able to say that, we've got this press kind of supporting us and supporting our product.
And so shortly after that came the Debenhams deal. So is it a similar story there?
I don't actually remember, to be honest, but I think I guess we've been fortunate in the sense we've had a lot of retail, a lot of kind of e-tail come to us, and a lot of the time we have to turn it down because it just doesn't work. And we're at a different stage in our business now where we do have more of a commercial mindset, and it is quite cutthroat and ruthless at times in the retail space. But I think the Debenhams deal came about with them coming to us as well. Probably off the back of some press or some features, or maybe trying our product, because we did quite a bit of kind of sending out products to different retailers for them to try it, and they get hundreds, if not thousands, of brands sending products to them week in, week out. So maybe the products just stood out and they reached out to us.
Yeah, I actually think the buyer's neighbor had got it in a glossy box. So I think she was like, oh, that was it, isn't it? She was like, oh, my roommate has tried your body scrub. And I think, I'm the buyer at Debenhams, I'm the beauty buyer, and I think it would do really well in store. And actually, we did sell out. We sold out. They ordered a couple of thousand units, and we sold out. And then sadly, they closed because of the pandemic. And then when Boohoo Group bought them, they still wanted to stock us. So we're still online with them.
And you mentioned about standing out and how your product stood out in such a saturated market. But there's one thing about your products that I actually hadn't come across before hearing about Delhicious, and that's the Ayurvedic side of things. And I think if you could just cover that and just explain what Ayurvedic is, and obviously how it's inputted into the products as well.
Yeah, I think when you're South Asian, you kind of grow up using all these natural beauty methods. And Ayurveda is essentially using natural ingredients to solve any kind of ailment. And that's not just for your body. It can be inside or outside. And I think both of us kind of grew up with that. Like my grandmother was from Delhi in India, and she was kind of like the queen of Ayurveda. Like everything, people would come to her for like natural solutions. So when we were formulating, we always had the idea that we want to create a brand that is, when you think of Indian skincare, it's always presented in the most typical way. You think of like yoga, and you think of like, really clean, white and green. And we were like, yeah, but you can actually make it mass market. And when we were starting the brand, we thought we want it to stand out and show Asian skincare in a different way, in like a more fun way, have a bit of personality to it, but also show that it works. And that's what we were thinking of, and that's where the name Delhicious came from, because we thought we want to kind of pay homage to her city of like, she's from Delhi, and then he came up with, what about Delhicious? And we thought, okay, yeah, natural skin food sounds good.
That's amazing. Obviously, Zakir here, the lyricist, coming up with Delhicious.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously Ayurvedic was completely new to me, and I'm not sure if any of our audience have heard about Ayurvedic either, but in terms of the Ayurvedic healing concept, is that quite big in the market? Would you say, having a monopoly, oligopoly on it, or are you the only ones?
We're not the only ones. I think there are brands out there that have kind of Ayurvedic principles within their products, but they're not brands that you or maybe anyone here would know about. You might see them on the bottom shelf in like a VB store or something, and it's not the place where you're going to buy skincare. Especially for the Gen Z millennial market as well. So essentially what it is packing that great stuff into a brand that resonates with today's people, which is your Gen Zs and your millennials. But I guess the fundamental part of it is that the product works. And that's something that's super important to us. I mean, we go through rounds and rounds, like hundreds of rounds of formulations to get things right. And even now, I mean, we're launching another 5 to 10 products this year. And it takes us a very long time to launch products because we can never get it right. And so the formulation and the product is probably the most important thing. It needs to work. And then we make the brand work around it.
So you obviously have a standout product. It's sold out everywhere it goes. It's getting a lot of attention. For anyone who doesn't know, Zara and Zakir were actually on Dragon's Den, but they went on Dragon's Den after you got the Debenhams deal. So I can't help but wonder, at that stage in your journey, you were getting attention from everywhere. Retailers were coming to you. Did you really want to go up equity at that point in the business for the sake of an investor when you were already getting attention? Or was there an alternative motive for going on Dragon's Den?
I think Dragon's Den is an interesting topic. Zara went on alone, actually, because I was in a corporate role and there was deemed to be a perceived conflict of interest. So unfortunately, Zara had to do it alone, but she did a great job, and I'm sure she can share her experience with it. But the plan was not necessarily to get a deal. And I think with Dragon's Den and with TV shows like that, I think the perception is that it's all about the business side, when actually it's not. It's a TV show, and it's catered and geared towards the audience watching rather than it being about business as such. So for us, it was more of a PR opportunity, and it was an amazing PR experience.
And with Dragon's Den, we didn't actually apply. The BBC producers reached out to us. So that's part of their job. They look for brands, and because we were getting traction on TikTok, they'd seen us on TikTok. So the BBC producer reached out and asked us, and we spoke about it and thought, is this something we really want to do? And again, even from the equity side, we were like, we're in a really good position in the sense that we've always been strategic enough to not have to raise funds. So we were okay. But I think we just took it as a PR opportunity. And obviously I had to do it myself, which probably made it worse because I felt like there was a lot more pressure on me to deliver. But yeah, essentially, Dragon's Den is very much an entertainment show. It's not an investment. It's really not an investment show. I'm sure there are a lot of people that do end up getting the deal, but they do also fall through afterwards. So there's a lot that you don't see with Dragon's Den, and actually there's a lot that people film and it doesn't air. So I actually know a few of my friends who've gone on Dragon's Den, they're like, our episode didn't air. So there was always a chance it wasn't gonna come on TV. But then we thought when it was ready to air, we were like, let's just go for it. Even though I didn't get the investment, it'll be a good PR opportunity. And it was great. Like off the back of it, we got a lot of support. And it was really nice. And yeah, I guess it was a good PR opportunity, and we didn't see anything past that.
Yeah, I think a point you mentioned, which is quite important, I think a stat that I saw was that 95% of brands on there that get investment don't actually go on to get the investment, which kind of just highlights the fact that it is a TV show. But what I would say, it really did help us. And if there is anyone in the audience thinking about going on Dragon's Den, then please do, because I can't remember the figures, but we probably had 1.5 million people on our website. We kind of had to shut it down. And it's not a position you want to be in, shutting your website down because you can't cope. But yeah, the visitors from kind of like 48 hours from it airing, we got so much traction. The sales were crazy. We couldn't cope. And actually, we're starting to see traction from Dragon's Den in Australia now, because I think they aired it a couple of weeks ago. So they aired the UK one in Australia a couple of weeks ago, which we didn't know about. But we started seeing spikes, and I think, where's this coming from? And then you kind of hone in, and it's like, it's in Australia, and you're thinking, okay. And then we're getting emails coming in. Yeah, it really did do well for us.
And obviously, for those that don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Delhicious does obviously ship worldwide, am I right in saying? Yeah? Almost. So,
I mean, we started off for the first couple of years just UK only. And then more recently, we've started to ship to the US, Australia, as well as most of the EU. So, yeah.
And before we move on to the social media and leveraging social media, which is, for me, one of the most interesting parts of your story, just, going on your TikTok and seeing incredible numbers, 4.5 million likes, 300,000 followers nearly. We did just want to mention the feedback that you got on Dragon's Den, and if you could just talk about what the dragon said to you on the show, for those who obviously haven't seen the episode.
It's so long ago, I really can't even remember. And a lot of it feels like it was such a blur, because you're actually in there for a lot longer than what they show. I think I was in there for about an hour and a half. And then, yeah, I mean, I really feel like I can't even remember what they said to me, but there was a lot of positives. Like, they were obviously, like, they were impressed that, it was a very homegrown brand. But I don't think they got it. And that's the only way I can describe it. I feel like they didn't get the brand. They didn't get the opportunity. I don't think they valued the social media aspect, which was a shame, because it was the first season that Stephen Bartlett was on there as well, and he's like the social media guy. And I was kind of telling them, like, look, I've grown a social media platform to, I think it was around 50 or 60K at the time, with no ad spend. Like, this is an interesting space. It's an interesting brand. But I actually can't even remember the reasons why they said they were out. I think they had like some problems with like the packaging, because it's plastic free. It doesn't work in the same way as plastic. But yeah, like overall, it wasn't as positive at the time. Like, I left there feeling absolutely horrendous and being like, why did I put myself through that? But then I think the feedback that I got afterwards was so nice, and I had so much support, especially from a lot of women afterwards, who said, like, it's not easy that you were doing this with very, very small children at the time. But yeah, like, it is an entertainment show, and there's a lot of build up that makes you more anxious, and then you realize that at the time, you're like, oh, this is very much, you kind of have to pitch to like 50 producers in a room before you actually pitch to the dragons. Yeah, so I'm glad I did it, but I mean, looking back, I don't know if I would do it again, to be honest. Like, I don't know if I would have gone on.
I think there's a couple of points that I obviously I was part of the whole process, but one of the things, the BBC, where they kind of film Dragon's Den, it's in Manchester. So we drove down in the morning, and it was a really hot day, and obviously our barms, they're kind of sensitive to temperature. So it wasn't the best weather to be traveling for 3 hours with barms in your boot. So the balms that the Dragons had, they weren't the best that they could have been. So when we got there, we had to quickly put them in the fridge to kind of get them to solidify a little bit, etc. So that was one of the things they picked up on. I think it was Peter that might have picked up on that. And then one of the other points I mentioned, which kind of again went viral after the episode on LinkedIn actually, was a comment I think Stephen made around why the business was quite stagnant during kind of the COVID period when people are at home, they're spending more money, etc. And obviously, one thing they didn't kind of take into account was the fact that we've got 2 young kids and we've been doing this alongside them. So they were always our priority, even at the early stages of the business. And therefore, we would have to prioritize them over the business. And so growth was hampered a little bit. But it's not necessarily an indicator of future. And I don't think they got that.
Yeah, and especially because the turnover had already doubled within like 2-3 months. So it didn't make sense. The comments didn't make sense. And I think that was his reason for saying he was out. He was like, oh, your numbers dipped. Why did they dip? That's a concern for me. But I think a lot of women afterwards were really outraged. And yeah, like there were posts that went viral on LinkedIn for that reason, because they were like, well, how can you make those kind of comments, not understanding that this is a reason why women don't get investment in business, because we're expected to work like we don't have kids when we're at work. It was really nice to have that level of support, because even then it felt strange to me, the reasons that he had said. But it was nice to know that everyone else kind of thought the same thing. But yeah, it is what it is. And I guess it was just a really good PR opportunity at the end of the day.
Sure. So I think the support that you mentioned speaks volumes to sort of the extent to which you blew up on social media after the episode. And obviously, this was a PR stunt for you. It worked very, very well. And you guys blew up on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram. But you guys didn't have a marketing background before Delhicious. And I can't imagine that it would be easy to blow up and then have to manage so many sort of consumers, potential consumers. So my question would be, how did you leverage that explosion? Are there any tips that you can give to people who may think that the dream is just to blow up?
It is a really difficult one. It's still something we're navigating through. There's constantly trends that you've got to keep up with. And I'm speaking here as if I know. I really don't know. She's the one that manages all of it, and she's the one that's blown us up on all the socials. So I guess it's something that we've just self-taught, or you've self-taught.
Yeah, I think with something like blowing up your brand, and I say this to a lot of small business owners and people that want to be entrepreneurs, I don't think that should be your sole focus. I think you just need to build your community of people. And going viral doesn't always mean sales. It doesn't always translate to sales. But equally, you don't have to be from a marketing background to be good at marketing, I guess. Obviously, I'm really passionate about my brand, and I guess I just kind of kept my fingers on the pulse a little bit with trends and things like that. But a lot of it was just organic content. And kind of studying what other people were doing, not necessarily even in the same space, and applying that to my own content. Just kind of thinking, okay, 3-second hook, let me put a 3-second hook in, or whatever it is. It was kind of like breaking down what other people were doing well, and just applying it to whatever it was that we were doing. I think that formula can work in any industry that you're in. And yeah, you definitely don't need to be from a marketing background. I have no marketing skills whatsoever. But it's just something that I've self-taught because I'm interested in the skincare industry. I look at what other brands are doing, not necessarily just in skincare, and just kind of applying it to your own, and just building a really solid community, because that is what it is. You're not just building numbers, you're actually building a community of people that are going to support you and continue to support your brand as well.
And it's something that you have to do. Right? If you look at who your customer is, it's your Gen Z and your millennials, right? And where are they? They're on social media. So you kind of don't have a choice but to adopt and jump on all the trends and continue to kind of evolve and innovate as you kind of grow your business, really.
And so does your journey on social media change the way that you see entrepreneurship in the modern day? Obviously, when you think back 20, 30 years ago, you'd get only advertisements on TVs, billboards, bus stops, things like that, things that cost money. Instagram, at the end of the day, especially if you have an organic growth, it's free. It's free to use. TikTok, completely free to use. And would you say that idea of social media being so important in a brand these days changes the way you see entrepreneurship and the way you see how businesses can grow a lot more easily?
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media has opened so many opportunities for people, not just in business, but if you look at like just people being influencers and creating their own personal brands off the back of, just being online. Social media is really integral. And like you said, it's free. And initially, when we joined TikTok, I was actually using it to share small business tips. Like just, there was a lot of like how-tos and tutorials on TikTok. I was like, okay, let me just join it on that basis. But then when our customers started sharing all their before and after pictures, that's when I started sharing them, and then people started really getting interested. Sadly, the algorithm is changing, and it is definitely getting harder to be more visible on social media. You have to pay. We still don't run any paid ads, and we still get some really good views just because we have a community present already. But yeah, it is free and definitely something that it should be integral to your business just because everything and everyone is online now.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point because I think marketing has changed so much over the last 15, 20 years, and obviously the markets have changed as well. I think social media just opens the door, it just completely opens the door to the world. You've got people in third world countries that might not have a drinking tap all day long, but they have a phone with TikTok on it. It's taken over the world, and you kind of just see new apps. Like who thought TikTok would be this big, right? You thought it was Facebook and Instagram and that's it, but there's no line. In a year, 2, 3, 5, there's going to be new platforms, and I guess it's just an opportunity. All of these platforms where there's hundreds of millions of people on them is just an opportunity to access your market. So I think you have to adopt it, and you've got to jump on board.
Yeah, and actually I think a lot of brands, actually really big brands, are only now joining TikTok and realizing the power of it. Initially, even when I joined, I had like a small business friend say to me, she has like a tanning brand, and she said, oh, why don't you join? I'm getting some really good sales. So I was like, okay, let's see. And I think by the time that even Stephen Bartlett joined, I think I had more followers than him. So, it's one of those things where you don't even realize that these platforms are going to get as big as they are. And a lot of the beauty brands are now joining, and you'll see in places like Superdrug and Boots where it'll say TikTok trending products. It's literally changing the way that people shop. But yeah, the algorithm's changing, it's getting harder, but it still doesn't mean that you can't join and still see some success off the back of it.
So, right from the beginning to the end, your journey has been quite unpredictable. So, you guys didn't necessarily know that Harper's Bazaar would spot you, that Debenhams would come to you, etc., etc. And so, how much of a factor would you say that luck is when you start up something like this? So there are people that want to, be entrepreneurs. They think that it's just a blueprint. If they do everything right, they'll blow up. Would you say that it's different? There's an element of luck.
I think so. I think potentially there's goodwill and luck in everything. But equally, I think having the right plan and the right strategy and being obsessed with what you do. We speak to people that have so many ideas, and sometimes great ideas, but if you've got 10 different great ideas, you're not going to focus and really obsess about one. And I think that obsession has worked for us because we obsess about our business, we obsess about our brand, the look, the feel, the content. We're super obsessed, and we're constantly uncomfortable. Every day in our office, we're uncomfortable because we're learning. And I think getting in a state of being comfortable is not a good thing. So for me, absolutely, yeah.
I don't know if I think it's luck. I think if you start something strong enough, knowing where you can take it, and if you know the industry somewhat, I think it can take you far regardless. Like, for example, I think branding is so important. If you're thinking about a beauty brand or a skincare brand, it's so important to have a standout brand, and that means knowing what it takes to build a good brand, something that is commercial, something that people are going to look at and go, yeah, that's nice and I like it and I'm going to pick it up. So I think if you create something with the end goal in mind, I don't think it's always luck. Like, for example, like Harper's Bazaar and et cetera, they didn't necessarily come to us. We did knock on 1,000 doors before one opened, as like cliche as that sounds. But if you are like obsessed with your brand, you're willing to do that. We're thinking about it all the time. We're talking about it all the time, and it does very much consume us. So we're now starting to see the fruits of our labor, because it wasn't easy to get here. And I think every entrepreneur would say that it's not easy, but it's worth it because you will gain from it in the end.
And I think a good example is TikTok. So when we joined TikTok, I guess we would be considered as early adopters, where the algorithm worked in our favor, I guess. Whereas now TikTok's becoming more of a mature platform where their algorithm is more difficult for the new new person to come and start marketing things, etc. So from that perspective, we joined at a good time and it helped us. So yeah, I guess it's a bit of both.
And so there's been, as one would put, a lot of golden nuggets of advice that you mentioned in the past 20 minutes. But for someone in your shoes, pre-Delhicious stage, with an idea, with a concept that they want to take to the market, whether it be in the healthcare and beauty business, whether it be in another sector, what advice would you give them to take it to the next step?
I would say network. I think networking is a really, really important thing. I think in the community here, it's great. You've got such influential, really helpful people, and really connected as well, which is helpful. And it's not something that your typical kind of outside community has. So I think networking is really key. I think research. Research is really important. Understanding your market. So if you're going to bring out a skincare product, really, really understand the detail of what you're bringing out, who your customer is, why you're different, why anyone's going to buy you. You know, it's really going into the detail and really focusing on the idea, the concept, as well as the plan. And we were talking earlier about when you start something and where you think it's going to go in 2 or 3 years, right? And when we started this, like, I had exit in my mind. I didn't have a time frame on it, but I knew at some point in this journey, an exit is a likely option, right? And it's really looking at that journey and what it could look like, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I also think you shouldn't be put off starting something that you have no experience in. I think we are prime examples of, we didn't come from a beauty background, had zero idea about skincare manufacturing and producing a product, even the legals around it. And we are very lucky to have, some things like Google at our fingertips to be able to really just educate yourself. And yeah, you really don't need to have any kind of previous experience, or as long as you're interested and passionate, that will come naturally. Like the knowledge you'll build will come naturally. And networking for sure, the small business world is actually so small. I think I have probably about 3 or 4 different brands who are going on Dragon's Den, for example, just because the industry is so small and everyone's so helpful. I truly believe there's a space for anyone. If someone was to ask for advice, I'm always happy to give it because there is a space for you. The market's big enough, so take some.
And I think another barrier that people think about when starting a business is the finances. And I mean, something like our business really didn't take much to start. These days, creating a website is £20 and you can do it yourself, right? The likes of Shopify, which is what we use. And so a lot of the typical barriers to entry, or the perceived barriers to entry, are not actually barriers. There's really quick, easy ways to get around things, and you can be really cost effective. So yeah.
So it's obvious that what we have in today's generation, social media, it makes entrepreneurship easier for people. But we were talking earlier, and I know that you said that you don't think it's necessarily for everyone. So could you expand on that? So despite things being easier today, you still don't think that this is something for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I stand by that. I think having your own business and kind of being obsessive about it and having a strategy and a plan and really wanting to execute that, it's not for everyone. Me and Zara have kind of gone through years of physical back-breaking work. And I genuinely mean that, back-breaking work, lifting 30, 50 kilo loads 500 times a day. We've gone through a lot. And it's not for everyone, right? I know from my corporate background, I had quite a big team. I had about 20 people working within my team. And a lot of my team, you can tell what type of people they are. They want to come to work at 9 o'clock and they want to leave at 5. And that's their life. And they want to do the same job day in, day out. They want to be comfortable. But having your own business, you have to be uncomfortable all the time because you're constantly learning, you constantly want to innovate, you constantly want to grow. So I stand by that. I think business is not for everyone. I think you have to really be motivated and driven. And there's different drivers. Some people are motivated by success. What is success? It's quite subjective. It could be financial, it could be kind of growth and how far you can get your brand out there. So I think definitely there's a type of person that kind of fits into that entrepreneurial mode.
Yeah, and equally, I think who you work with and who you start a business with is also incredibly important. Like, I think we've been working together for a couple of years now, but I still think we're still developing those roles of who does what. But it's definitely becoming a lot clearer. For example, like I'm definitely more like the marketing and the creative side, and he's got an amazing business brain. Like his negotiations are just insane, which is why I was like, if you came on the den, you would have definitely got it. Like I'm like way too soft. But who you work with is so important. I think people, especially when you're young, you think, oh, I just want to work with my friend, and we start a business together. But actually, like you don't know that relationship until you start working with each other. I mean, we're husband and wife, and obviously we like bicker all the time, like literally, especially when we're like making products and what we're going to call them. But it's a very like delicate relationship to balance, and you have to do it with the right person. So it's about knowing your skill set as well, whether it's something that you can do and who you're going to do it with, because it's much easier to do it with someone than doing it by yourself.
It's a very unique perspective to say that entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, but it's something that I'd agree with, and it's something that's definitely justified. You need the right characteristics to really succeed in the market. And it's some people say it's those characteristics that you're born with, not ones that you can learn. We'd love to just ask you that if you started Delhicious again today, post-pandemic, knowing what you know over the past few years, what would you do differently?
I think it's hard to say, because we've learned so much from where we started it. I guess for us, maybe it would be like having more products. When we started, we literally launched with one thing, which probably made it harder because we were in this one niche of body care. Maybe starting with more products, but then that would have been like more of a financial thing that we would have had to compromise. It's hard to say. I think like we've learned so much, isn't it, in these past 3 years?
Yeah, I think one thing that springs to mind is kind of the strategic stuff. It's like really thinking about who your customer is. Because for us, that was not something we really thought about in detail from the start. It kind of grew. As we grew our products, as we started to engage with our community and our customers, we then started to realize who our customers were. And so by definition, we kind of could have set that out from the offset. So I think strategy is such an important thing. I think planning out that journey, obviously I explained the exit part, but I guess that was a bit of a loose plan. It could have been more detailed. So I think the planning side, the organization side, we definitely could have done a lot better. But equally, our growth has worked alongside our lives. And in that sense, we probably couldn't have done anything differently, because we've had young kids. They're still young, but they can feed themselves now and they can put themselves to bed.
Yeah, no more nappies. Oh, God.
Yeah, no more nappies, no more milk. So from that perspective, things went how best they could have, I guess, in light of our family situation. So yeah, but I think planning and strategy is always important. We often speak to people that kind of rush into things, They think they have that amazing idea, and they might do, but you're not going to execute it overnight. You need a really strong and robust plan to go and deliver on that, and I think that's often lacking at the start. Yeah,
I'd agree. I think there was a lot of things that we did fluke, but again, I think it was because of the life stage that we were at, and we've talked about this so many times. We're like, wouldn't have this been so much easier if we'd done this before we had kids? Because we had our girls really close together as well. They were really young at the same time. So I don't know if we would have done anything differently in that sense, but yeah, strategy I think is so important to have that end goal. And also I think we were quite naive when we used to start. Like in my head I think, oh, once we get into a retailer, like that's it, we're gonna sell out. But actually we now have a really strategic plan with our retailers, because we know that when we launch in store, we want people to go, oh my God, there's that brand from TikTok that we know, as opposed to just sitting on the shelf, not selling and then being delisted. So there's a lot that I think would do differently now, but that would have come with the knowledge that we have now. So it's hard to say.
Guys, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks for having us.